This is the nine-dragon wall that was unique to ancient royal buildings. It can be said to be the highest standard. There is a similar nine-dragon wall in the Forbidden City. It's okay to put it in modern times. If it's in ancient times, no one can use such high-standard things except the emperor. Once discovered by the royal family, it would be a crime of treason, and it could even punish the 9 races. Moreover, this courtyard has 4 entrances and 4 exits, and the entry yard has actually built a miniature version of Suzhou Garden, with rockery, pavilion, small bridge, and running water. There were only a few loyal servants of the Jiyu family in the courtyard, so Sarah had no scruples, took off the mask, took Charlie's arm, and said to him, "Charlie, do you remember this yard? When we were young, we often play hide and seek here." Charlie nodded and said, "I remember, but I always feel that it is not right in the memory." Sarah smiled and said, "This is a refurbishment. Compared with before, there are some changes." After that, she pointed to the frozen water and said, "There have always been many good koi carps here. Some have been raised in Gu's house for more than 30 years, and some are still what you have seen before. But now it's cold. The koi have been raised in the next wing, and they will be released when the spring begins. Would you like to go and see?" Charlie said in surprise, "How long does the koi live?" Sarah smiled and said, "The lifespan of a koi is about 60 to 70 years. If it is well raised and taken care of, it can live a few more years." With that said, Sarah shook her fingers seriously and said, "Look, there are several kinds of pets. If you raise them well, they may live longer than you. The other is the koi, and the other is the tortoise and parrots. Macaws and sunflower parrots can live to 60 or 70 years old." As soon as the voice fell, she took Charlie and said, "Come, I will take you to see them, and see if you can recognize them." Afterwards, Sarah took Charlie to a wing next to the courtyard. This wing room has a large area, and more than half of the area inside has been made into a constant temperature fish pond, in which a lot of huge koi are swimming around. Sarah pointed to one of the koi, which was nearly 1 meter long, and said excitedly, "Do you remember it? You used to name it Nobita. The name from Doraemon." Charlie smiled and nodded. "Remember, in the impression when I was a child, he seemed to be the largest." Sarah nodded and said, "It is a Taisho 3-color koi. My dad said that the price of buying it was worth the price of a 3-bedroom in East Cliff 3rd Ring Road." Charlie was slightly startled, although he was a little surprised, but he was not too shocked. The koi thing is actually very expensive. Some time ago, the eldest lady of the Zhang family spent more than 10 million to procure a piece of koi. Charlie had also seen it. Therefore, the value of precious koi cannot be measured by the dimensions of ordinary ornamental fish. At this time, Sarah bent over and squatted on the edge of the fish pond, beckoned and called Nobita to the huge koi. Unexpectedly the koi swam over directly. Sarah reached out to touch it, and it did not hide at all. Sarah touched the koi while saying, "Nobita, look, Charlie came to see you. Do you remember him? He still remembers you." Although koi is not afraid of people, he may have some familiarity with Sarah, but after all, it is not human, and it is impossible to give Sarah any response. And Sarah was talking to it, and then raised her head and said to Charlie, "My dad said, Nobita is only 30 years old this year. If he takes good care of him, he can live for another 40 years. We played with him when we were young. Soon, when we have a baby, the baby can play with it too." Although Charlie didn't respond to Sarah's words, his childhood memories continued to emerge in his mind, and they were still imperceptibly, making him feel a little closer to Sarah. He even came up with an imaginary picture in his mind. If his parents were still alive and he has not lived in Orus Hill, should he be married to Sarah now? Perhaps the one who is guarding this pool of koi now is no longer the one who is walking with Sarah, and perhaps his parents, Sarah's parents. Even, it is really possible to follow 1 or 2.5 older children, chatting around him and Sarah, crying to their parents, and then asking them many details and memories about the koi. In fact, all this is not Charlie's unreasonable conjecture. He knew his father's character. Chang Ying, the second master of the Wade family, had a good word. If he was still alive, if he dared to say not to marry Sarah, he was afraid he would break his leg. Moreover, most of Eastcliffe's top rich second generations were married earlier, because the family had arranged the marriage partner early, and generally they would organize the wedding immediately when they reached the legal marriage age. In that case, he might have married Sarah in the door when he was 22 years old. Counting it down to now, he may have been married to Sarah for 4 years. If he was more efficient, it would be normal to have 2 children. Seeing that Charlie was a little lost, Sarah asked quietly beside him, "Charlie, what are you thinking?" Charlie smiled bitterly and said, "I think of my parents." Sarah sighed softly, "I also thought of Uncle Wade and Aunt Ann just now. I was just thinking that if there was nothing wrong with them that year, we might have already been married, and we might have had children. If they were here today, maybe 3 generations have gathered." Charlie was obviously startled. Unexpectedly, Sarah thought of it too.